Thanks so much for watching Ember News Live. I'm Francesca Maxime. Here's a look at the top stories making headlines all around the world at this hour. Well, it was at the 11th hour, an agreement on the fiscal cliff. The White House and the Senate are just waiting for the House to sign off on a deal that leaves many still wanting for better terms. And Happy New Year! And so it went in New York City's Times Square for hundreds of thousands of people and for people all around the world. We'll take a look back at the celebrations from Dubai to Berlin and beyond. But it was not a good start to the year for partygoers in Ivory Coast as dozens of people enjoying fireworks from New Year's Eve celebrations were killed in a stampede, many of them women and children. And you might want to move over, Evel Knievel. This title goes to 31-year-old John Harbour for the best leap over hunks of junkie cars in the U.S. He was kind of hunky, too. We'll have more of that amazing video coming up next. Well, from fiscal cliff to fiscal accord, a deal has been reached after months of bipartisan fighting. Leaders in the House, the Senate, and the White House all worked into the early hours to meet each other halfway.
The yeas are 89, the nays are 8. 60 vote threshold having been achieved, the bill as amended is passed.
Racing the clock, the White House reached a New Year's Eve deal with Senate Republicans, and early on the first day of 2013, the U.S. Senate passed legislation that will dissolve the fiscal cliff, a combination of tax increases and spending cuts that were set to kick in at midnight. The pre-dawn vote was heavily one-sided in favor of the legislation at 89-4 to 8 against. With months of government gridlock, the activity in both chambers was remarkable as the Obama administration and lawmakers spent the final hours of 2012 haggling over their differences. However, according to both sides, passing this agreement does not mean that the negotiations will stop.
If we do nothing, the threat of a recession is very real. And passing this agreement does not mean negotiations halt. Far from it. We can all agree there's more work to be done.
Each of us could spend the rest of the week discussing what a perfect solution would have looked like, but the end result would have been the largest tax increase in American history. The President wanted tax increases, but thanks to this imperfect agreement, 99% of my constituents will not be hit by those hikes.
Under the deal, taxes would remain steady for the middle class and rise at incomes over $400,000 for individuals and $450,000 for couples, levels higher than the $250,000 Obama had campaigned for. Shortly after the Senate vote, the president said the agreement was the right thing to do and encouraged the House to pass it without delay.
All right, well, hundreds of thousands of partygoers all crowded into New York City's Times Square last night to watch the crystal-covered ball make its annual descent, ringing in the start of 2013.
New York City's annual New Year's Eve ball drop ritual drew thousands into the cold night air to celebrate. As the clock struck midnight, couples around the square shared their first kiss of 2013.
I couldn't believe that, I have such an amazing woman with me here on New Year's Eve.
This was my first time. It was absolutely incredible.
New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg was in the square to welcome in the new year, along with his partner and daughter. New York City's countdown was the first in decades without television host Dick Clark, who died back in April. One of the crystal panels on the ball was engraved with his name.
Happy New Year!
The ball is covered with 2,688 Waterford crystal triangles and illuminated by more than 32,000 colored LED lights. And it dropped to an appreciative crowd.
Yes, it was! I love this. I'm really cold though. It was worth it.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I mean, it's my second time, but it's worth it. It doesn't matter the cold and just going without food. It's so worth it because there's nothing else like it. So there's nothing else like it.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime experience, but she went twice. Well, after the big party, of course, came the big cleanup. As hundreds of thousands of partygoers headed home, sanitation workers moved into Times Square this morning to begin collecting the tons of trash that was left behind. Around 17 million pieces of confetti rained down on the square during the celebrations. Combined, the tiny strips of paper themselves, they weighed more than 1 ton. Can you believe that? In a special tribute, the confetti carried the names of popular longtime New York Eve's host Dick Clark, who died in April. The strips also carried special New Year's messages handwritten by visitors to New York. Work to clean up the square and remove crowd control barriers continued until daybreak, and we thank you for your service in helping clean up our city. Well, partygoers all around the globe welcomed the arrival of the new year. Now let's take a look back at the celebrations overnight that rocked our world.
Auckland in New Zealand was the first major city in the world to kick off the New Year's celebrations. As 2013 made its way across Asia, Shanghai joined in with the party atmosphere. In Myanmar, thousands turned out for the first public outdoor festivities since a ban on such gatherings under the former military-ruled nation was lifted. North Korea lit the touch paper on a firework display in Pyongyang, then added to the occasion with the first New Year's speech by its leader in 19 years. London rang in 2013 to the chimes of Big Ben, completing what the city's mayor described as an amazing end to an incredible year following the Olympics and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee. In Berlin, more than 1 million crowded around the landmark Brandenburg Gate to see in 2013 in style and launch a wealth of New Year's resolutions.
To work harder and play harder.
I just want to be a nicer person for everyone.
Dubai used the world's tallest tower, the 828-metre Burj Khalifa, as the stage for its fireworks show. In South Africa, revellers in Cape Town celebrated what some hoped would be a more peaceful year to come.
Well, I hope that it's a wonderful year, full of joy, full of love.
Throngs of people packed Times Square in New York for the city's traditional celebration. Copacabana Beach in Rio was the big venue for Brazil's Hello to 2013, drawing an estimated crowd of 2 million for the start of what's likely to be a bumpy year for economies around the globe.
Wow, some pretty spectacular celebrations. Well, hundreds of Moscow residents braved the cold weather on the first day of the new year to visit the city's Gorky Park and enjoy what has been described by Russia as the biggest ice skating venue in Europe. The historic park opened in 1928 and was named after Maxim Gorky, a political activist and author who was the founder of socialist realism in literature. The park also hit international fame when it was written about in a novel, which was later turned into a film. Gorky Park, however, slid into decline in the post-Soviet era, but a revamp in 2011 has put it back on the social map. Today, it is the place for wealthy Muscovites to show off their latest winter fashions and their moves on the ice. Well, ringing in the new year did turn deadly in Africa as dozens of revelers were killed during celebrations in Ivory Coast. At least 61 people died when New Year's partying turned into a panic stampede early this morning in Abidjan, Ivory Coast Commercial Center. 40 people were injured, 2 of them seriously after a fireworks display that ended around 2 a.m. Most of the victims were women and children. The tragedy happened as hundreds of people were leaving celebrations in the city's central business district and heading back home. It is still not clear exactly what triggered that stampede around 1 in the morning. On to Syria now. As the country's bitter conflict nears the 2-year mark, Syrians celebrating New Year in Damascus said that they had hoped that 2013 would bring peace and reconciliation to their weary people. As the clock struck midnight, no celebrations were evident in the streets of the capital, and as the new year dawned, activists and state media reported heavy clashes and shelling in the suburbs of Damascus and other parts of the country. with international efforts making little progress in halting the conflict and President Bashar Assad stubbornly holding on to power, stability in the region may well be a long way off. Earlier today, activists said Syrian warplanes were bombing a suburb of Damascus. Still, at the start of 2013, Syrians did express hope for their country's future, with one saying, "We hope our country will get back to what it was like before, and we hope stability and safety will return and people will love each other as they used to do." While another said, "We hope safety and security returns to this country, and this crisis we are living through will come to an end and that people become united as they were before." Well, the president of Syrian National Council says that UN envoy to Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, is just wasting his time in recent meetings aimed at ending Syria's civil war.
I am sure that our revolution will continue in the right way. I hope Free Syrian Army will get victory more and more. And also, I hope the international community will recognize exactly what happened in Syria and do his duty towards our people, to help our people in humanitarian aid, really humanitarian aid, and help Syrian people to defend themselves by providing weapons to free people seeking for freedom and dignity.
Well, George Sabra, speaking in Istanbul, shared those opinions about Brahimi's visit to Iran, Russia, and Syria within the last few weeks. Brahimi, who represents the UN and the Arab League, warned on Sunday that as many as 100,000 people could be killed in the next year alone. Brahimi has reported little progress in his mission to push forward a peace plan for Syria, first presented in June at an international conference in Geneva. The proposal calls for an open-ended ceasefire and the formation of a transitional government to run the country until new elections can be held and a new constitution drafted. Well, 2012 was a pretty tough year for the world economy. Double-dip recessions in Europe, a dodgy recovery in the U.S., and a slowdown among the developing economies. We're talking now to the pundits, though, to find out if 2013 might be any better.
In 2012, the U.S. economy grew at less than 2.5%. The outlook for next year is not much better. As Europe continues to plunge in a downward spiral, the U.S. will have to be cautious about bilateral trade.
When Europe catches pneumonia, the U.S. gets a cold. The U.S. economy definitely has some ties to Europe. We have multinational companies that depend in part on sales within Europe. We have banks that have some exposure to European countries and European sovereign debt.
Meanwhile, China is expected to overtake the U.S. economy within the next 20 years.
I think the new leadership has brought in some more dynamic. So I expect that China next year, both on the social front and economic front, we probably will see more dynamism coming next year.
In Russia, Putin's challenge for the next 6 years is to rev up and modernize the manufacturing sector. In India, the world's largest democracy, high inflation and interest rates have hit both consumption and investment. So what does the new year bring to over 1 billion people?
I think political reality will be what that will come to the fore, and politics will trump economics. Absolutely, I'm certain about that next year. So we are going to see many welfare schemes, not just from the central party, but from the various regional parties. Where that leaves the economy, it's anybody's guess.
Well, earlier today, Thai authorities distributed much-needed food and drink to a group of Rohingya Muslim refugees who were spotted adrift in a crowded boat off the coast of Phuket on Monday after fleeing violence in Myanmar. Officials boarded the wooden vessel, which contained about 70 refugees, including 20 women and children, who were trying to flee to Malaysia from Myanmar's Rakhine state. They had been traveling without any food or water for nearly 2 weeks. The refugees are not permitted to land on Thai territory and were expected to be sent on their way to continue their hazardous journey. Myanmar has been facing criticism from the international community following sectarian unrest between Muslim Rohingyas and Buddhist Rakhines, which has killed almost 200 people since last June. Rohingyas are not currently recognized by the Myanmar government as its citizens. To South Africa now, media there said that 3 people died and 4,000 were displaced when fires swept through shacks in poor settlements near Cape Town on New Year's Day.
Well, everything burned down, all the houses just burned down on the ground. It started around 12 o'clock and we didn't think much of it. I saw it and I saw somebody burning to death. And sometime around 4, that's when everything escalated and everything as it is now.
I lose my clothes, I lose my house because my house also is here. Everything, I don't have nothing now. The way you see me, only the stuff I have, only this one I wear it now.
Broke out in Khayelitsha and Tembini, densely populated areas where many residents live in makeshift homes. The worst fire started just before 5 a.m. in Khayelitsha when many people were still sleeping. 3 people died, another suffered serious burns and was taken to the hospital. That cause of the fire is still under investigation. Well, to Colombia now, authorities there continue searching for victims after a landslide covered a stretch of highway near the city of Neiva in southwestern Colombia over the weekend. As of Monday, the death toll from the landslide stood at 3, with at least 7 injured. About 300 rescue workers using heavy machinery and rescue dogs were working at the site searching for missing people after the landslide Saturday. The toll could rise because about 7 cars were believed to be trapped, but rescue officials said they did not know the exact number of victims. Earlier, officials had estimated the number of victims could be as high as 20, but later said that the death toll might not be as high. Well, a rescue operation in Brazil takes a troubling nosedive when a helicopter sent to save a drowning swimmer plunges right into the ocean.
It happened off Rio de Janeiro's crowded Copacabana beach. As the helicopter positioned itself over the drowning swimmer, its engine failed. Horrified beachgoers watched as the copter then crashed into the surf only a few dozen yards offshore. Several of the sunbathers rushed into the water, swimming out to the wreckage to assist the crew. All 4 crew members and the swimmer survived the crash with only minor injuries, and they were able to swim to shore just minutes after the accident. Rescue workers have been working non-stop as hundreds of thousands of tourists crowd Brazilian beaches to welcome in the new year. More than 2 million people converged on Copacabana Beach on Monday for its famous New Year fireworks display and, of course, the raucous celebrations.
Well, thousands of people in Hong Kong took to the streets on the first day of 2013 to urge the chief executive to step down.
Immediately, we want a universal suffrage because this election committee chose Mr. CY Leung as the chief executive. And in the past few months, we can see that he is not capable to be a chief executive, and he don't have any credibility to be our chief executive.
Leung Chun-ying has faced a credibility crisis and fervent calls for his resignation since he took up the position in July of last year. A scandal erupted over unauthorized additions to his 2 homes, which was exposed by the media after he unexpectedly won the leadership election in March. Leung has apologized for the structures at his homes, but protesters were not satisfied with his explanation. The former British colony returned to Chinese rule in 1997, but people in Hong Kong cannot elect their own leader until 2017. Leung was chosen by an exclusive committee with Beijing's allies. While hundreds of visitors crowded into a wish fair in the Peruvian capital of Lima to buy good luck charms to attract good fortune for the new year. Believers bought toy cars, houses, trucks, babies, brides and grooms, and even some cows, all representing the wishes that they have for next year, or this year now. For a fee, visitors could hire the services of a shaman to read their future in cocoa leaves or receive a symbolic cleansing with a shower of petals or a dead possum. No thank you. Those who wish to attract money in 2013 placed fake dollar bills on a figure known as Akiko, a popular deity who is believed to bring good fortune. The popular Wish Fair runs through January 17th. All right, what are you gonna do if you're pregnant with twins? Mostly you would rejoice, right? That news did send a couple that you're about to meet soaring with joy. But at their 18-week checkup, an ultrasound exam revealed a serious problem. One of their babies had a severe congenital heart defect, and there was little chance that she could survive without any kind of surgery. Her story of courage starts at the Mayo Clinic.
Little Ava Weidel and her twin brother Aiden were still in their mother's womb when Ava was diagnosed.
The doctor came in and he said, you know, there's a problem with your daughter's heart. And, you know, you hear those words and you just think, well, what do you mean?
Ava's parents, Christina and Brad, learned that without open-heart surgery immediately after birth, Ava's chances of making it were slim.
Ava has one of the particular kinds of congenital heart disease called hypoplastic left heart syndrome, where the left side of the heart does not develop as it should.
Dr. Benjamin Idem is a Mayo Clinic pediatric cardiologist who, along with surgeon Harold Burkhart, led the team that cared for Ava.
Her right pumping chamber that has to supply blood to her lungs and to the rest of her body has to do the work of 2 pumping chambers.
A medical team made up of experts from many specialties developed a detailed plan for Ava's arrival. It began with a scheduled C-section.
So at 8:20, she was born, and they basically pulled her out and they held her up, so I got to see her for a couple seconds, and then they had to whisk her away.
You know, there's my little girl, and you know, you don't know what's going to happen from there on out.
Babies like Ava need 3 different surgeries. During this first operation, Dr. Burkhart and his team reconstructed the aortic arch so blood can flow to her brain and out to her body. He also placed a shunt to allow blood to flow to her lungs. The second surgery will happen when Ava is from 4 to 6 months old. Dr. Burkhart will create a conduit to allow blood flow from the top of her body to the lungs. Then when Ava's about 2, the third surgery will help the blue blood from her body flow to her lungs for oxygenation. The first surgery is the most difficult, and Christina says it was tough to see their baby connected to a mass of tubes afterwards.
Emotionally, it was so hard. I just couldn't hardly breathe.
But this little girl survived.
Ava means life. That's how we decided to name her Ava.
For her first few months, Ava stayed in the neonatal ICU, where she got to know the team that cared for her. But her parents say what their daughter grew to love most was to once again be close to Aiden, her twin brother. For Mayo Clinic News Network, I'm Vivian Williams.
Those cheeks.
What a cutie pie. Well, it is a leap of faith as thrill seekers in the UK gathered for a car jumping competition. This is one you have to see to believe.
For sheer automotive madness, you will be hard-pressed to beat this year's car jumping championship. Held at a racetrack in West Sussex, England on Sunday, it was Hollywood-style action, albeit minus the glamour, and was a big hit for the crowds that assembled to see the brave drivers accelerate their cars over a ramp in an attempt to fly over a line of old wrecked cars and land safely on the opposite side. Needless to say, those that fell from the sky and crashed into the lineup got spectacular applause. Each attempt was judged on elevation, the applause of the crowd, and most importantly, the distance, as only a few made the jump across all 10. In the end, it was 31-year-old John Harbour who took home the title. No prize money, but he did earn bragging rights.
And he got that amazing trophy, right? Well, thanks so much for watching this New Year's Day edition of Eber News. We hope that you'll stay with us for the rest of the year as well. Meantime, let's close the show with a final look at last night's celebrations. Happy New Year.